All right, I'm super excited because this is the first video that I am actually recording in my van, which I have converted to be a mobile home and office. And today in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about what goes through my head when I am calculating macros for a one-on-one client. So let's dive in. When I'm calculating macros for a one-on-one client, there's a few things that I need to take into consideration. First, I have an intake questionnaire that I'm going to be gathering things like age, weight, height, gender. Those are going to help me determine the client's basal metabolic rate. So those are the first things that I'm looking at are age, weight, height, and gender. From there, next thing that I got to consider, and you might think it's exercise, but it's actually non-exercise activity, because the activity that you do where you're not necessarily putting on your best workout clothes and going to get a sweat on actually makes up, after the basal metabolic rate, most of your daily activity. If you don't have much, then you're probably not burning too much more than basal metabolic rate. So I'll categorize this as NEAT or NEAT. The next thing that I'm looking at, as you may have presumed would be number 2, is actually what's their exercise like. And I'm not just looking at what their exercise activity is for the total energy expenditure, but I'm looking at the type of exercise. I'm looking at the volume and duration. I'm also looking at the intensity, and that's going to help me dictate what is the level of carbohydrate, what is the level of fat that is necessary to actually fuel that type of training. So exercise is going to help me figure out total calories as well as fat and carb. From there, another thing that's going to be really important to me in figuring out what the right macros and calories are for this client is what their dieting history looks like. If this client has recently lost a bunch of weight on a calorie deficit, they might have a metabolism that is a little bit slower. They're probably not burning as much energy as they would have if they just went through, let's say, a mass gain phase, or if they were at a maintenance level. So the next thing that I'm looking at is diet history. And I'm not just looking at that to figure out, okay, where might their metabolism be, but I'm also looking at that because qualitatively, it's going to tell me whether or not a client is going to be able to stick to the macros that I'm actually prescribing. So for example, if somebody's gone through a paleo diet, that is usually a little bit higher protein, that is usually a little bit higher fat. And if they did well on that diet, that tells me that they'll probably do well if I give them macros that are a little higher protein, maybe a little higher fat. They might struggle if all of a sudden I throw a lot of carbohydrates at them. So this diet history, it's important for a number of reasons. The other things that I'm going to take into consideration here as well are their goals. And with all one-on-one clients that come to us for Beyond Macros, I have an initial consult with them before we even get their intake questionnaire responses. So I'm going to know what's their big picture goal, as well as what they want to achieve over their first 90 days of working with us. And with that information, I'm able to make in the short-term decisions that actually take into account what their long-term goals are. So if a client comes to me and they're telling me, Matt, I really want to be lean, but I want to be strong, and 3 years from now, I'd love if I could do well in the open and maybe qualify for regionals. Then I'm not going to put them on a diet that is going to cause a lot of muscle mass loss and really sacrifice performance now, because that doesn't serve their long-term goals. So I might give them a deficit. I might give them macros that are going to help them lose fat, but I'm really taking into consideration, how am I going to maintain muscle mass? How am I going to maintain performance during this time? So the goals is a really big thing that needs to be taken into consideration. Another thing that I didn't necessarily mention here, but also can be important, is their current body composition and their body type. And I'm lumping these together because generally those will really just tell me, okay, what's their carb tolerance? So if you think about the idea of like endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph, or if we put it in easier terms, you've got your hard gainer, your easy gainer, and your responder. Hard gainer being someone who they just can't put weight on. Easy gainer being someone who looks at a carb and puts on weight. And then a responder being somebody who their body just responds to what they're doing. that's going to tell me what their carb tolerance looks like. And if somebody is already a bit overweight and has excess body fat, they might have lower carb tolerance than someone that is lean and athletic. So those are all the things that I am taking into consideration when putting together a calorie and macronutrient prescription for a client. Next thing that we'll talk about is going to be how I actually take the information that I've got here and then translate that into numbers. All right, so now that I just gave you all that information, in the next video, I'm actually going to take you through how I synthesize all that and then come up with a macronutrient and calorie target for the client. That way you can really get inside my head as I am doing the calculations. So stay tuned for that. Make sure that you subscribe and leave a comment if you have any questions about the process that I just took you through.